I've torn down literal tons of heavy, massive, bulky engines on this channel. 6.2 liters, 6 liters, 5.9, 6, 7, 7 liters, even Viper engines. But I haven't done very many small engines, and I get a ton of requests for them. So today, we're going to take apart a 1.4 liter turbo engine from a Chevrolet Cruze. It's Cruze Sonic. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the 1.4 turbo engines other than I've never heard a single person complain about them. Okay, I've never heard a single person not complain about them. I get calls for these all the time. I do not sell them because I don't really do Cruze parts that often. I don't really buy Cruzes. All I've heard is these engines are not good at all. Now, I'm sure some people will say, oh, I've got 250,000 miles on them. And also people will say Cruzes typically aren't well taken care of. And you are all correct. You can make anything last if you take care of it. But there's a reason these engines are like $2,000 and the cars are a Chevrolet Cruze. There's a reason. So this engine is bad. This engine actually comes courtesy of Premier Automotive in East Alton, Illinois. This engine was a core they replaced for a customer. And I actually have a story on it. I don't know miles, but they did tell me that this engine runs good until you put coolant in it, and then it hydrolocks. So that's kind of cool. I don't know that we're going to find any bent rods or anything crazy, but we're going to find some damage. That's for sure. Well, let's get cracking. This 1.4 liter turbo engine puts out 138 horsepower. I'm not really sure if they make a lot of performance parts for them. I'm sure some parts do exist. I don't know what the performance capability is with these engines, but I don't see a lot of modified Cruzes either. I haven't really worked on a 1.4 liter turbo engine, but I can see a few things I don't particularly care for. The first thing, external Torx crank pulley bolt. That seems like a bad idea to me. I think it's probably fine in most situations, but I'm sure a few people have had a bad time if they strip that one out. The other thing I don't really care for on this engine is the location of the oil filter housing. I feel like a better place would be on the back of the block under the intake, albeit that would be a lot less accessible. Because of its location, it is right by the hot exhaust where the downpipe or cat pipe bolts to the turbo. And when you pull the oil filter out of its housing, it likely pukes oil right down the front of the engine. You can't keep this area clean, and it's right by the hot exhaust. It just doesn't seem like a great idea. So this engine was overheated so bad that I can't get one of the coil boots out. I'm just going to leave the plugs in the head. We'll get them out when we get the head off. We'll inspect them all at the same time. First, we'll start by removing the heat shield off the turbo, and then we'll get the turbo off. We need to remove, looks like the oil feed off the top of the turbo to get that manifold bolt out. Wow, that's a strange oil return. It's a 16-pound turbo. Let's take a look at this turbo. Unfortunately, due to the design of the compressor housing, I can't really look at the impeller. But the integral exhaust manifold and exhaust housing are notorious for cracking on these turbos, and this one is cracked pretty severely. Now, I don't really know if this actually causes any issues. Back in the 80s and 90s, all the turbo cars back then would crack the exhaust housing around the wastegate hole. It was almost impossible to find a nice exhaust housing back then, much like it is today, but we never really saw any adverse effects back then. But on top of that, this turbo doesn't really spin good at all. It does spin, but I couldn't sell this. These turbos are worth good money, but there's no way I could sell this. A better look at that crack. It's pretty severe on this, but it doesn't go through to the outside. So no exhaust leaks. At least I don't think. Oh, nope. I was wrong. There's a little hairline crack. Yeah, so this turbo isn't something I could sell, so I'm not really that concerned about it. Next, we'll pull the valve cover. I don't know if I can get the dipstick out or the valve cover off. But blew to the rescue. That's been on there for a little while. Sure, it's going to be nice and clean underneath here. It's actually not terrible. I figured it would look much worse than this. So this is pretty dark and dingy in here, but it's not as bad as I expected. This is all crankcase ventilation stuff down here. It's all a very simple design. I don't see anything major sticking out at me at this point, but we're not there yet. All right, we're going to pull these cam sensors. Or what are these? Actuators? Do these actually do anything? I don't know. Are they solenoids? You guys will tell me. So yes, those are the electronically controlled variable valve timing actuators. They press on these buckets. Huh. That's pretty simple. The first thing I'm going to do, whether it's right or not, is remove the cam gears. I'm sure there's a chain tensioner around here somewhere, so we're just going to take that out and start pulling other things apart until there's enough slack to get the cam gears out of the cylinder head. That did not help me. Is that just an inspection hole? That might just be an inspection hole, and I might need to peel the timing cover off next. Timing cover next, really? What? That's what we're going to do. I have one shot at this. That was surprisingly easy. Does this come right off? Oh, that was great. Okay, I'm just going to start buzzing bolts out, see what happens. Okay, some larger bolts in this area. This is where the oil pump is. And oh my God, 6-sided bolts. 13 millimeters, no way. Well, it's sure acting like it's still bolted down. Did I miss one? Let's give it a little tap. Well, that worked almost too good. Oh no, there's going to be parts flying everywhere. Not really. Oh, this thing's leaking. Let's stay. There's one cam gear. Oh man. Oh, there's the timing system. Here's the tensioner, which I kind of expected that. Will this not count? Oh, I know how. Yes. Look at it. Nice, fine chain. Okay, well, the guides have some wear, but they're not terrible. Uh-oh. Does this still have oil in it? I don't think so. We'll just go with it. It'll be fine. This timing cover, like many, has an integrated oil pump. Of course, we're going to take this apart and see what the inside looks like. Oh, wow. I didn't know they put a 4L60 in here. Okay. It's a vane style pump. I did not expect that. Oh, it's never going back together now. Not that I would put this back together. I don't really see anywhere. This all looks pretty good. Yeah, I didn't suspect this was going to have any oiling issues based on the shop I got the engine from. What they said. Now, there is a massive spring in there, and I feel like I don't know if I can even get that out. I bet you I can get that out. We're going to try to get that out, but there's going to be the right way, and then there's going to be the way that we do it. Okay. So that seems pretty well locked in there. But it's not all the way locked in. Oh, this is going to be dangerous. Okay. Ah, it's over there. I had no idea where it went. It just vanished and then reappeared on the floor over there. That wasn't so bad. First, let's get these timing chain guides out of the way. I'm guessing this was a higher mile engine, judging by the wear on that timing chain guide. They're not terrible. It's not like it's broken up. It's not like it's a BMW, but still pretty worn. Now, the design of this cylinder head does lend itself to be pulled without pulling the cams, but I really want to see what the journals look like. So we're going to pull the cams. Thankfully, these are numbered, so I don't have to go too crazy. So all of the cam journals look pretty good in this engine. I don't see any major damage at all. As well, the cam caps look good. The cams look really good. This isn't bad at all. Nope. We got to get this timing chain gasket out of the way. Time for the head bolts. Now, I feel like using my normal breaker bar is just complete overkill for this engine, but it's what I got. I forgot about these two. It's fine. Okay, time to pull the head. Oh, this is really light. Well. Ooh, bad. Well, right off the bat, we can see, look at the condition of that head gasket. This engine got hot. It's like that between every cylinder and on both sides. I have no doubt that it was consuming coolant because look how clean the center two combustion chambers are. The outside combustion chambers are probably normal, but these have been steam cleaned with coolant. So I've got the head here and the straightest edge in the shop. When you put this across that cylinder head, I can definitely say daylight. Not as much as that Honda Fit, nowhere near as bad as that. But there's definitely some air gaps between the straight edge and the area of the cylinder head between the combustion chambers. The block paints a similar picture. Look at the cleanliness of those two pistons. The bores have some vertical scratches. They're not awful, but they're not great. There's nothing melted, not like that Honda Fit engine. Well, let's flip this engine over and hopefully not make too big of a mess. I mean, it's a little engine. How much of a mess can it make? Not terrible. Now let's pull the oil pan. Huh. It's pretty sludgy in there. How does the... Oh, that's got a really cool pickup. I don't know if that cool is the operative word there, but it's different. It has a very different pickup. Is that solid? Ew. Why did I touch that? So there's no real debris in this pan, just lots of sludge. I don't really see a whole lot of sparkles, if any. It just looks like some pudding. But the pickup is really interesting. It has a pickup right here. It's where it sucks the oil in. It goes up this part of the pan, and there's actually a screen right here in the pan that it looks like you install. There's a freeze plug in the pan. That's okay. There's a screen in here that is installed through a freeze plug in the front of the pan, which is there's the screen, and there's the freeze plug. I've never seen that on any other engines. This is a first. Okay, let's get this windage tray out of the way. Also gross. It's so little. It's also locked up? No. Maybe. Oh, blue. Blue will get it spinning. Yeah. I just didn't want to pry on it too hard with my hand. Nope. Now this engine still has copious amounts of oil in the piston, so I'm actually going to rotate the entire block one more time so that everything comes out and I don't have to make a bigger mess than needed. Something chunky just fell out of that. I'm sure glad that's not on my floor. Let's start pulling the rods and pistons. Of course, you always want to start at the front. Okay, they're fractured rods. You know what? We're just going to push every single one of these to the top of the bore. That's the plan. And then when I pull everything else apart, we'll get the rods and pistons out last. Now this block is a split block. It's got a bed plate, which is the bottom part of this engine. So we're going to unbolt that, pull the crank out, and then we can push the rods and pistons out of the top of the block quite easily. Then I can just pluck the crank out. Oh, it's got to. And now I can take the crank out. No. The rods and pistons look pretty decent out of this engine. There's not a lot of skirt wear. I mean, they're pretty dirty, but there's no damage at all. The rings all move freely in the ring lands. And some of the coating's worn from the skirt. A couple of them in the center cylinders, which is probably where the majority of the heat was. Does have some scoring, as you can see. Yeah, right there. Look how clean they are, though. And I seem to have lost one of my bearing shells. I don't know what happened, but the bearings are actually in really good shape. And I wanted to kind of compare things, put things into perspective. A month or so ago, I tore down a Honda Fit 1.5 liter naturally aspirated engine. And I saved one of the rods and pistons out of it because I wanted to compare it to something else of its size. So here is the Civic rod next to the Cruze rod. The Cruze rod looks like a tree trunk compared to the Civic rod. Keep in mind, the Cruze is a turbo engine and the Honda is not. But they are significantly different. You can see the rod length is significantly different. It's pretty interesting to compare. The crank is actually really nice. Now, I don't know if this has any value, but this is definitely one of the parts I would be able to sell out of this engine. And the block isn't too bad either, but the amount of heat at the top really concerns me. I don't necessarily think the bare block is going to be worth any money, so this might end up in the bin. There's no main bearing damage or thrust bearing damage. No oiling issues here, which is surprising with the amount of sludge in the pan. I would like to set the record straight. I do not hate external Torx fasteners at all. I own European cars that are riddled with those fasteners. I just feel like there's a time and a place to use them, and a central crank bolt or harmonic balancer bolt is not a good idea. I just feel like it's a recipe for disaster. This was a very simple teardown, but most small engines are, and it was clearly overheated severely. Most cars come with a gauge or a warning light, and usually they will give you other symptoms other than catastrophic engine failure. That's usually the last symptom. This engine got hot enough to where it allowed coolant to come into the combustion chamber and hydrolock the engine. I don't know what caused it, whether it was a failing water pump, it could have been an air blockage, like something in front of the car, it could have been a clogged radiator. There's several different scenarios at play, and we will never know those answers. But one thing we do know is that we owe this teardown to Premier Automotive. They supplied us with this week's teardown. I would never have had one of these engines otherwise, so thanks again for this engine. And yes, there is a slingshot behind me. I will part anything out. As long as it fits in the building and fits in the margins, I'll consider it. So if you'd like to buy parts off of the slingshot or the few good parts from this Cruze engine, I'm going to leave our email in the video description. And as always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.